It was a quiet Tuesday evening when Jake Delaney first heard the voice. Faint, almost like a whisper carried by the wind, but distinct enough to send a shiver down his spine. "Help me." It echoed in the depths of his mind, and though the streets around him were empty, he knew he wasn't alone. What followed would defy everything he knew about his life and the world. A woman named Althea, an alien, appeared from the shadows, claiming he was the only one who could break a curse older than time itself. But as the mystery unfolded, Jake learned that his destiny was more intertwined with hers, and the powerful artifact they sought than he could ever imagine. What was he truly chosen for? And could he survive the trial that would change everything? The truth was out there, and Jake was about to find out just how far it would pull him. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel by clicking the card button on the top right corner and hitting the notification bell so you can get amazing daily stories as and when published. Please do comment your views about the story or any topic that you want to get a story on. We will make it happen. Let's dive in the story. It was a moonless night when Jake Delaney first heard the voice. Sitting alone on the edge of his apartment balcony, the city stretched out before him. Quiet, almost unnervingly still. The usual hum of New York had died down, leaving only the distant sounds of traffic, like a whisper on the wind. The cold air bit at his skin, but didn't bother him. He was used to the solitude. After all, life in the big city could feel like that sometimes, full of people, yet entirely lonely. Jake leaned back, eyes scanning the skyline, the glow of the city lights reflecting off his beer bottle. He'd had a long day at work, a series of meetings, and the usual frustration of trying to move up in a company that seemed too big to notice him. Sometimes, it felt like no one was paying attention, not even the world outside his window. That night, he was in a daze, letting the moment slip by when it came, an almost imperceptible sound. At first, Jake thought it was the wind or maybe the rustling of the trees below. But then, as if from nowhere, a soft whisper drifted through the air. "Help me, please." His heart skipped a beat. It was so faint, barely more than a breath. But the words, they weren't normal. They had a weight to them, a desperation that immediately sent chills down his spine. He paused, listening, expecting to hear it again. His eyes darted around the balcony, searching for the source. But the night was silent. No one was there. "Jake, I'm here. Listen to me." The voice was clearer this time. It wasn't just a whisper. It felt like it was right next to him, yet there was no one in sight. Jake's pulse quickened, and he stood up, eyes scanning the darkened alley below, the streetlights casting long shadows that twisted like reaching fingers. He felt a sudden urge to go closer, to search for the person who was speaking. His mind raced with possibilities, someone playing a prank, maybe a friend trying to mess with him, but it didn't feel like that. There was an odd intensity in the air, something otherworldly. "Hello," Jake called out, his voice trembling, but the wind carried it away. Nothing. He stepped to the edge of the balcony and peered down at the empty street below. His apartment was high up, but the voice, no, the feeling, came from somewhere so close. It wasn't just the whispering. There was a pull, a magnetic force that urged him forward. "Help me, Jake." The voice echoed again, this time unmistakable in its clarity. "I need you." This time, Jake felt it. Something inside him was stirring, something he couldn't explain. He could almost sense the weight of her words, pressing into him, demanding attention. He swallowed hard, then shook his head. It was crazy. There was no way he was hearing someone or something calling out to him from the shadows. But he couldn't deny it anymore. "Who are you?" He whispered, his throat dry. His mind raced, grappling with a mixture of fear and curiosity. There was no one on the street, no one in the alley. "I'm here, Jake, just below." He turned to the stairwell, his feet moving instinctively, even though every part of him screamed to stop. But he couldn't. He had to know. His heart pounded as he descended the steps, the feeling of being watched never leaving him. It wasn't until he reached the street below that he saw her. She stood in the shadows, her figure outlined by the faint light from the street lamp. She was tall, with dark hair that fell in waves, glowing faintly in the dim light. Her eyes, those eyes, locked onto his, and Jake froze. They were deep, almost glowing, pulling him in. Her suit, sleek and form-fitting, made her appear both powerful and elegant. She spoke again, her voice softer now, like a comforting whisper. "I knew you would come." Jake's mouth went dry as he tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. He stared at her, trying to process everything. How did she know his name? Why was she here in the middle of the night? What do you want from me? Jake finally managed to ask, his voice hoarse. The woman, Althea, as she would soon tell him, took a step closer. The air around them seemed to thicken, and for the first time, Jake felt an electric charge, as if everything in the world had stopped for a brief second, just for them. "I need your help, Jake," she said, her gaze unwavering. "And in return, I'll give you what you've always wanted." Jake's heart was racing as he stood before the woman, Althea, as she had introduced herself, wondering if he was dreaming or if something far more bizarre was happening. He glanced around, expecting someone to jump out from behind the alleyway to yell "Gotcha" in his face. But there was no one else. The street was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint hum of distant cars on the highway. "What do you mean, help?" Jake asked, his voice wavering. He still couldn't quite believe what was happening. "What are you really asking me for?" Althea's gaze softened, but there was an intensity in her eyes, something hidden beneath her calm demeanor. "You have no idea what you're being called to do you, Jake?" Her voice was gentle, almost comforting, but with an edge. She took a step closer to him, her presence overwhelming. "I don't even know who you are," Jake said, shaking his head. "You just appeared, out of nowhere. I don't get it. I don't even know how you knew my name." Althea's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, and there was something about that smile that unsettled him. She didn't look like she was going to hurt him, but there was something otherworldly about her. She was too beautiful, too perfect. She didn't belong in this world. "I've been watching you, Jake," she replied quietly, her voice lilting in a way that made him shiver. "And I know you've been feeling lost, like there's something missing, something greater you're meant for." She stepped even closer, her eyes boring into his. "You're not like the others." Jake swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. He didn't want to believe her, but something about her words struck a chord deep within him. He had felt out of place his entire life, always searching for meaning, for something bigger. It was as if Althea knew exactly what he had been going through. "What do you want from me?" he asked again, his voice almost a whisper. His mind was clouded with confusion, but there was no turning back now. He needed answers. Althea took a deep breath, the weight of her next words pressing down on her. "I'm not from around here, Jake. Not in the way you think. I've been sent here by forces you can't understand. Forces that have been watching over you as much as me." Jake furrowed his brow. "Sent here by who? What are you talking about? You're not making sense." Althea's expression darkened, and she took another step closer, her hand brushing against his arm. "I'm not human. I am something else. I've been cursed, bound to this world until I can break free. I need you to help me. You're the only one who can." Her words hit Jake like a punch to the gut. Not human? Cursed? The world around him seemed to blur for a moment, and he stumbled back, trying to process what she was saying. You're telling me you're some sort of alien?" Jake's voice shook as he spoke, disbelief written all over his face. Althea nodded, her gaze never leaving his. "Yes, I come from a distant place. I've been trapped on this planet for years, unable to return home. I'm a prisoner of this curse. But there's a way out, Jake, and you can help me find it." Jake's head was spinning. Alien? A curse? The words felt foreign, like they didn't belong in the same conversation. His thoughts were a jumbled mess as he tried to make sense of everything. "And what do you want me to do?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible. Althea's lips parted slightly as she exhaled, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. I need you to help me find something. A powerful artifact hidden somewhere in this city. It's the key to breaking the curse. Only someone like you can retrieve it. Jake blinked, his mind racing. Me? Why me? How do you even know that I can help you? Althea's expression softened, and she reached out, touching his hand lightly. Because you're special, Jake. You've always been special. I've seen it, felt it. You have abilities you don't even know about. And together, we can break the curse, set me free, and give you the life you've always dreamed of. Jake pulled his hand back, still unsure of what to think. But there was something in her eyes, a mixture of desperation and sincerity, that made him hesitate. He couldn't ignore the pull, the strange connection he felt to her. He didn't know why, but a part of him believed her. Why me? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. What do I have that's so special? Althea tilted her head, her smile returning, though it was tinged with sadness. You'll understand soon enough, Jake. You'll see. But right now, I need your trust. Jake's mind was reeling, but something deep inside him urged him to take the leap. He didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was standing at the edge of something greater. A part of him wanted to walk away, to forget everything she said. But another part, something far stronger, compelled him to stay. All right, he said, his voice steadying. I'll help you, but you have to promise me no more secrets. Althea's eyes widened slightly, and she nodded, her voice low and earnest. No more secrets, Jake. I promise. And just like that, his life would never be the same again. Jake couldn't believe what he had just agreed to. He had stepped into a world that felt like something out of a science fiction novel. But Althea, this otherworldly woman who stood before him, made it feel real. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, and Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to become part of something far bigger than himself. Something he couldn't possibly control. They met in secret over the next few nights, each meeting revealing more and more of the mystery surrounding Althea. She took him to dark corners of the city, places Jake had never paid attention to before. Abandoned buildings, hidden alleys, and forgotten subway stations. All of them felt like a part of the puzzle she was trying to solve. Do you trust me now, Jake? Althea's voice came to him one night, clear as ever, though there was a hint of something darker underneath the words. He glanced over at her. They stood in an empty parking lot beneath a flickering streetlight, its dim glow casting long shadows over her sleek figure. Althea was always like that, unearthly, graceful, with an air of power that both intrigued and unsettled him. I'm starting to, Jake said, his eyes scanning their surroundings. The city seemed more alive with each step they took together, as if it were waiting for something to happen. He wasn't sure if it was his imagination, but the air felt charged whenever she was near. You should, she said, her smile cold but sincere. You're the only one who can help me. Help you with what? Jake asked, his voice tense. He was beginning to feel like he was just a pawn in some larger game, and yet he couldn't bring himself to pull away. Something about Althea kept pulling him back, a magnetic force he couldn't resist. I need you to help me find the artifact, Jake. The key to breaking my curse, she said, her voice serious now. It's the only way to undo the bond that keeps me here. Jake frowned, still skeptical. But what's so special about this artifact? What does it do, really? Althea's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and for a moment, Jake could have sworn he saw something ancient and sorrowful within them. It's not just any artifact. It was created centuries ago by my people. It holds the power to bend reality itself, to alter time, space, even life and death. She paused, her gaze steady. In the wrong hands, it could destroy everything. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, and Jake felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The gravity of what she was saying was impossible to ignore. Why me? He asked again, the question still lingering. Why do you need me to do this? What's so special about me? Althea stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "Because, Jake," she said softly, "you are more than you think. You've always had the ability to sense things that others can't. I've seen it. You have a rare gift, one that can help me unlock the artifact's power." Jake's breath caught in his throat as the pieces started to fall into place. The strange occurrences in his life, the dreams that had haunted him for years, the feeling that there was something more just beyond his grasp. It all made sense now. "Your gift is linked to the artifact," Althea continued, her voice like a soothing melody. "And together, we can use it to free me from this curse." A chill ran down his spine. "How do you know all this? How do you know I can help you?" Althea looked away for a moment, her gaze darkening. "I've been searching for someone like you for a long time. I knew when I saw you, knew that you were the one who could help me." Her voice was distant, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "But it's not just about the artifact, Jake. It's about breaking the bond that ties me here. If I can't, I'll be trapped in this world forever." Jake's mind raced. Everything felt like it was moving too fast. One moment he was just a regular guy in New York, and the next he was caught in the web of an alien woman's curse, with the fate of more than just himself hanging in the balance. He looked at her, seeing the raw vulnerability in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before. For the first time, he believed her. "All right," Jake said, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. "I'll help you." Althea's lips parted in a slight smile, and she reached out, her fingers brushing against his. "Thank you, Jake. I knew you would come through." As they stood there, hands almost touching, Jake felt a surge of energy between them. It was subtle at first, like a low hum vibrating in the air, but he could feel it, and it terrified him. What had he just gotten himself into? "There's one more thing," Althea said, her voice soft but firm. "The artifact is hidden in a place you would never think to look. It's not just about finding it. It's about understanding what it truly is and what it can do." Jake took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. "Then let's find it," he said, his voice unwavering. "Let's break your curse." And with that, they set off into the night, unknowingly walking toward a destiny that would change everything. Jake couldn't believe how quickly things had escalated. Each night felt like he was falling deeper into a world that didn't belong to him. Althea had kept her promise. They would meet in secret, in places no one would expect. She took him to the forgotten parts of the city, to places that seemed to exist in a different time. Ancient tunnels beneath the subway, abandoned factories covered in rust and overgrown ivy, places where time had stopped. Yet, despite all the mystery surrounding her, Althea had a way of making him feel like he belonged. But with every meeting, Jake's unease grew. The more Althea explained about the artifact, the more his doubts began to surface. He had always felt like something was off, like it didn't quite fit in this world, but now, standing beside her, in these darkened corners of the city, he wasn't sure if he was in over his head. "Do you trust me yet, Jake?" Althea's voice broke through his thoughts as they stood at the edge of an abandoned building. Her tone was serious, her eyes locked onto his. "I don't know," Jake admitted, glancing at her. "I want to, but something about all this, it doesn't feel real." Althea nodded, understanding in her gaze. "I get it. You're scared. But this is real, Jake. The artifact, the curse, the world that's hidden from view. None of this is a game." Jake rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of everything pressing on him. He was in too deep to back out now, but there was still so much he didn't understand. The more she spoke, the more questions he had. "So, where exactly are we going tonight?" Jake asked, his voice betraying his skepticism. He glanced around the area, wary of any unwanted attention. The city was never as quiet as it seemed, and something about this place made his skin crawl. "There's a place," Althea began, her voice low, "where the artifact lies hidden. But it's not just a simple task to retrieve it. There's a test, Jake. A trial that only someone with your gift can pass." Jake raised an eyebrow. "A test? What are you talking about?" Althea's eyes flashed with something unreadable. The artifact doesn't just give itself up. It requires a sacrifice, a choice. To unlock its true power, you need to prove you're worthy. Worthy, Jake repeated, incredulous. You're telling me I need to prove myself? I don't even know what I'm doing here, Althea. She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming in the cold night. Jake, this isn't just about you helping me. It's about you unlocking the truth about who you really are. You've always had this ability, this connection to things others can't see. That's why you're here. You're the only one who can retrieve the artifact and break my curse. Jake's pulse quickened. The weight of her words hit him harder now. He had always felt like there was something more to him, something he couldn't quite understand. But he never imagined it would lead to something like this. Is it really worth it? Jake asked, his voice tight with uncertainty. I don't even know what I'm getting myself into. What if I fail? What if I can't do it? Althea placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch light but firm. You won't fail, Jake. I believe in you. But the choice is yours. If you want to help me, to free me from this curse, you have to face the test. You have to trust that you're ready. Jake stood there for a long moment, looking at her. Her eyes held his, and for the first time he saw the truth. Althea wasn't just some stranger from another world. She was someone who needed him, someone who believed in him when he couldn't even believe in himself. He nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. All right, I'll do it. I'll help you. Althea's face softened, and for the first time, a real smile graced her lips. Thank you, Jake. You don't know how much this means to me. He shook his head, still trying to make sense of it all. I don't know what I'm doing, but I guess I'll find out. Let's go get this artifact. Together, they made their way deeper into the city, the darkness swallowing them whole. The air around them felt thick with anticipation, with the knowledge that whatever happened next would change everything. Jake had no idea what the test would be or how it would affect him, but one thing was certain. He couldn't turn back now. As they walked, Althea spoke again, her voice quiet but resolute. The test will be hard. It will push you to your limits. But remember, you're not alone. I'll be with you every step of the way. Jake glanced over at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He didn't know what was coming next, but he knew that whatever it was the beginning of something much bigger than himself. He had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. He was no longer just a bystander in his own life. He was a part of something far greater. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As he followed Althea through the darkened streets, the city around him seemed to grow colder, more distant. The buildings towered over them like silent sentinels, watching their every move. The air was thick with tension, and he could feel the weight of the decision he had made pressing down on him with every step. You're getting closer, Jake. Althea's voice broke through the stillness, her tone calm, yet filled with urgency. The artifact is near. We're almost there. Jake nodded, but his mind was racing. Every word she spoke, every glance she threw in his direction, seemed to carry a hidden meaning, a secret she wasn't sharing. She had told him about the trial, about the test that awaited him, but what she hadn't said was just how dangerous this was. There was something in the way she spoke, something in her eyes that hinted at a deeper, darker truth. Althea, Jake started, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. You've said that I have a gift, that I'm the one who can help you. But what does that really mean? What's this artifact really going to do? Why is it so important? Althea didn't answer right away. She kept walking, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Jake could hear the faint hum of distant cars, the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind, but otherwise, everything was unervingly quiet. Jake, she said finally, her voice softer now, the artifact holds the power to change everything. It's not just a tool, it's a key to breaking my curse, yes, but also a key to something much greater. It can bend time, reshape reality itself. It's what my people created to protect themselves, to ensure their survival. But they failed, and now I'm the one who has to fix it. Jake's mind raced as he processed her words. Time? Reality? This wasn't just some ordinary object. He had known that from the start, but hearing it spoken out loud made the danger feel so much more real. He had no idea what he was walking into, but he knew one thing. He couldn't back out now. So, what happens when we get it? Jake asked, his voice tight with nervous anticipation. How do we break your curse? What's the test? What do I have to do? Althea stopped suddenly, her eyes scanning the shadows around them. It's not just about finding the artifact, Jake, she said, her voice low. It's about understanding its power. Only someone who truly understands their purpose can wield it. The test will show you who you really are. It will reveal whether you're worthy of its power or if you're too weak to handle it. Jake felt his stomach tighten. Worthy? I'm not some hero, Althea. I'm just a regular guy. I don't know anything about bending time or reshaping reality. I don't even know if I'm ready for this. She turned to face him, her gaze intense, almost searching. That's why you're here, Jake. To find out if you are. You've always had a connection to something greater, something you've never fully understood. That's why you're the one who can break the curse. The power is inside you, but won't be easy. The test will challenge everything you think you know about yourself. Jake took a step back, trying to absorb everything she had just said. His mind was a whirlwind of questions, of doubts. He had never thought of himself as special, never imagined that he could have a purpose beyond the mundane tasks of everyday life. And now, Althea was telling him that he had been chosen to do something no one else could. Are you saying that I have to pass some kind of test? To prove I'm worthy of what? His voice trailed off, unsure how to even finish the sentence. Althea's eyes softened for a moment, and she stepped closer. Yes, Jake, you have to prove that you're ready. But I believe in you. You're stronger than you know. The words hung in the air, and Jake felt a strange warmth spreading through him. Althea's belief in him, in this unknown power inside of him, was both comforting and terrifying. How could he be the one to do this? How could he be the one to face this test? To wield a power that could change the very fabric of reality? I don't know if I can do this, Jake admitted, his voice cracking slightly. I don't know if I'm the right person for this. Althea placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but firm. You are, Jake. You've always been. Trust yourself. Trust in what you're capable of. Jake looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. For the first time since meeting her, he felt a surge of determination rise within him. Maybe he wasn't just some ordinary guy. Maybe he had been prepared for this moment his whole life, even if he didn't know it yet. I'll do it, he said, his voice steady now. I'll face whatever comes next. For you. For this. Althea's expression softened, and for a moment, the intensity in her eyes disappeared, replaced by something almost tender. Thank you, Jake. You don't know how much this means to me. He nodded, but deep down, he knew that whatever came next wouldn't just change Althea's fate. It would change his own. The path ahead was uncertain, and the test was still a mystery, but one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. He was in this until the end. The air was thick with tension as Jake and Althea descended deeper into the labyrinthine underground of the city. The flickering lights from the distant street lamps above barely pierced the darkness around them. Every step they took echoed in the silence, and the weight of the moment hung heavily between them. The artifact was close now, closer than ever, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about retrieving some ancient object. There was something else at play, something that Althea had yet to fully explain. Are you ready? Althea's voice broke the silence, her tone serious but almost expectant. Jake swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves. I don't know if I'll ever be ready, but I'm here. Althea's lips quirked into a small smile, but there was no humor in it. That's more than most people can say. You're stronger than you realize, Jake. He didn't feel strong. He felt terrified, but he didn't voice that. He couldn't. Now when they were so close. Not when the thing he was supposed to help her with was within reach. They passed through a crumbling doorway into a vast, forgotten chamber deep beneath the city. The walls were etched with strange symbols, their meanings long lost to time. The air was thick with dust, and the faint glow of Althea's presence seemed to light the room just enough for Jake to make out the object in the center. There it was, the artifact. It sat on a pedestal, bathed in a soft, ethereal light, as if it were alive, pulsing with energy. Jake felt it the moment he laid eyes on it. A powerful pull, an invisible force that seemed to draw him toward it. His heart raced, and his skin prickled. The room itself seemed to hum with power, a living thing waiting to be awakened. "That's it," Althea said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's the key." Jake couldn't take his eyes off the artifact. It looked like nothing he'd ever seen before, an intricate, glowing crystal encased in a web of metal that seemed to shift and move on its own. It was beautiful, but there was something inherently dangerous about it, something that unsettled him to his core. He turned to Althea. How do I get it?" She stepped forward, her eyes never leaving the artifact. "You don't just take it, Jake. You have to pass the trial. You have to prove you're worthy of its power." Jake frowned. "You said there was a test, but what does that mean? What's the test?" Althea's expression grew dark, her gaze intense. "The artifact is bound by ancient magic. It will test you in ways you can't predict. Your strength, your willpower, your deepest fears. Only by confronting those things can you unlock its power." Jake felt a cold sweat forming on the back of his neck. His mind raced with questions, but one thought stood out among them all. "Am I ready for this? What do I have to do?" he asked, his voice low. Althea's eyes softened. "You'll know when the time comes. The artifact will reveal what you need to face. But you have to be strong, Jake. You can't hesitate." He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He couldn't hesitate. Not now. Slowly, cautiously, Jake stepped toward the artifact. The closer he got, the stronger the pull became, as if the artifact was reaching out to him, calling him forward. He hesitated for only a moment before placing his hand on the cool surface of the pedestal. Immediately, the room shifted. The ground trembled beneath his feet, and the air grew thick with an overwhelming energy that nearly knocked the breath out of him. Jake stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest as the walls around them seemed to close in. His vision blurred, and he heard a voice, not Althea's, whispering in his mind. "You are not ready. You will fail." The voice was cold, mocking, as if it knew every doubt he'd ever had, every fear he had tried to bury deep within himself. The walls around him began to shift, and Jake felt a sharp pressure in his chest, as though the very weight of his insecurities was bearing down on him. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. "Jake, listen to me." Althea's voice broke through the fog, desperate. "You have to fight it. This is just the beginning. Don't let it control you." Jake gasped for air, trying to push past the crushing weight of the voice in his head. He could hear Althea's words, but they felt distant, like they were coming from another world. He was alone in this moment, facing whatever dark part of himself the artifact had unleashed. "You're weak," the voice mocked. "You'll never be enough. You're nothing." Jake's legs buckled, and he fell to his knees, clutching his head as the words echoed louder and louder. But in the back of his mind, he heard Althea again, her voice now sharp and clear. "You're stronger than you know, Jake. You have the power inside of you. Don't let it win." With a surge of determination, Jake fought back. He clenched his fists, gritted his teeth, and pushed the voice away. Slowly, the pressure lifted, and the darkness began to recede. The room calmed. The walls stopped shifting, the ground steadied beneath him. The air felt lighter again. Jake opened his eyes to find the artifact glowing brighter, its power now fully awakened. He had passed the test, and somehow he knew this was just the beginning. Jake stood before the artifact, his chest still heaving from the trial he had just faced. The room was silent now, save for the faint hum of energy that radiated from the glowing crystal. He could feel the power surging through him, a force he could barely comprehend. But one thing was clear: he had passed. He had conquered whatever it was that the artifact had thrown at him. And yet, despite the victory, something lingered in the air, something he hadn't quite understood. "Are you okay?" Althea's voice broke through his thoughts, soft but concerned. She had been watching him closely, her eyes never leaving him. But there was something new in them now, a flicker of respect, maybe even admiration. Jake nodded slowly, still trying to catch his breath. "Yeah, I think so. I don't know what just happened, but I'm not dead. So that's a win, right?" Althea smiled, though it was fleeting. "It's more than that, Jake. You've done something no one else could. You faced your fears and emerged stronger. But you still don't fully understand, do you?" Jake frowned, looking back at the artifact. It pulsed in the center of the room, almost like it was waiting for something. He felt a stirring inside him, a sense of unease creeping back in. "What do you mean?" Jake asked, his voice hesitant. "I passed the test. I proved myself. So what's next?" Althea took a step closer, her eyes darkening with something Jake couldn't quite place. "What you don't understand is that the test wasn't just about the artifact, Jake. It was about you. The artifact is a tool, yes, but it's also a key to unlocking something much deeper. It's connected to you in ways you still don't fully grasp." Jake swallowed hard. "What do you mean? How is it connected to me?" Althea paused, as if considering her next words carefully. "The artifact is more than just a powerful object. It's a conduit for something greater, something ancient. Your connection to it, your ability to wield its power, is because you were chosen. The artifact has been waiting for someone like you to unlock its true potential." Jake's heart raced. "Chosen? For what?" Althea stepped closer, her gaze intense, almost unblinking. "For purpose, Jake. The artifact is part of a much larger plan, a plan to restore balance, to fix something that was broken long ago. The curse that binds me is part of that plan, but so are you." Jake's mind spun. This was more than he had ever imagined. "So, you mean this whole time it wasn't just about helping you break your curse? It's about something bigger?" "Yes," Althea said softly. "Your purpose has always been linked to this moment. The trial, the artifact, it was all part of preparing you for what comes next." The weight of her words settled on Jake's chest like a heavy stone. He wasn't just helping Althea. He was part of something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. His mind raced, his heart pounding in his ears. He had thought he was just an ordinary guy caught in an extraordinary situation, but now it felt like everything in his life had led him to this point. "And what happens now?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper, the uncertainty creeping back into his thoughts. Althea's eyes softened, and she reached out, placing her hand gently on his arm. "Now, we finish what we started. The artifact is no longer just a key. It's a beacon. It will lead us to the next step, to the answers we need." Jake glanced at the artifact again, his hand instinctively reaching out toward it. This time it felt different. The power that radiated from it was no longer overwhelming. It felt like it was calling to him, inviting him in. "Are you ready?" Althea's voice was calm, but there was an undeniable urgency in it. "This is where it truly begins." Jake nodded, a sense of purpose finally taking root inside him. He wasn't just a bystander in this story anymore. He was part of it. The piece that had been missing for so long had finally clicked into place. His life, his destiny, was no longer a mystery. "I'm ready," Jake said, his voice steady, a newfound strength rising within him. Althea's gaze softened, and for the first time, there was a flicker of relief in her eyes. "Good, because we're about to change everything." With that, they turned toward the artifact, and as Jake touched it, he felt the world around him shift. wasn't just a physical change. It was as if the very fabric of reality was bending, pulling them into a future they had yet to understand. Whatever came next, Jake knew one thing for certain. It was going to change everything, and there was no going back. Here is the story ends. If you enjoyed and want to watch more thrilling sci-fi adventures, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Dive into epic battles, explore distant galaxies, and join brave heroes as they fight for survival against impossible odds. Let us know in comments if you want next chapters to publish soon. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and become part of the journey. Together, we'll keep the last light burning. Subscribe now and let the adventure continue.